Hi, I'm Alia.
Hi, I'm Nagin.
This is our podcast on transgenders using the bathroom that corresponds to their gender identity. North Carolina and Missouri just recently passed a law restricting transgenders from using the bathroom that does not correspond with the gender that is written on the individual's birth certificate.
California has now just passed a law that counters this, allowing transgenders to use the bathroom that corresponds with their new gender identity.
Many people are against the idea of transgenders using the bathroom that corresponds with their new gender identity because they have an imaginary fear, believing that, quote, transgender people will go into public bathrooms and assault our wives and daughters, end quote, or that they will be a, quote, playground for pedophiles.
One of the many people against this new transgender bathroom bill is Assemblyman Tim Donnelly. As a result of this law being passed, he is pulling one of his sons out of public school, enrolling him in a private so that he is not subjected to this new law.
According to CNN.com, 6 in 10 people oppose the law that prevents transgenders from using the bathroom corresponding to their new gender identity. Republican Mr. McCrory said that, quote, the right and expectation in one of the most private areas of our personal lives is now in jeopardy.
However, 3/4 of all Americans are in favor of laws guaranteeing transgender individuals equal protection. Overall, 50% of Americans oppose laws that grant trans people from using bathrooms that do not correspond to their original gender identity.
About 25% of people have strong support for the laws of transgenders using whatever bathroom they want, but about 38% of people oppose them, and another 39% of people strongly oppose these laws, outweighing the ones who do support the laws for transgender people. The federal government demanded North Carolina, quote, remedy the act or risk being in violation of federal law.
The United States Department of Justice just warned North Carolina on Wednesday that their new law that limits bathroom access violated the civil rights of transgender people, meaning North Carolina can lose millions of dollars in federal funds.
In a letter to Governor Pat McGrovey, the top civil rights lawyer for the Justice Department, Vanita Gupta, said that, quote, both you and the state of North Carolina were in violation of civil rights law and gave him, Governor McGrovey, until Monday to decide whether he will, quote, remedy these violations, end quote.
The Federal Civil Rights Act of 1964 was passed after years of marches, beatings, sit-ins, and lynchings, part of the convulsive change across the country that gave African Americans the same rights that white citizens had to drink at water fountains, get jobs, buy homes, stay at hotels, and vote. A creature of its time, the law prohibits discrimination because of, quote, race, color, religion, sex, or national origin, end quote.
This new prohibiting law goes against the Civil Rights Act of 1964 because it discriminates against the sexual orientation of another individual.
17-year-old high school student Lila Perry from Missouri changed from male to female and was reported by fellow students for making them uncomfortable. The school board held a meeting and they decided that she was no longer welcomed into the bathroom of her choice.
Quote, I believe that my school isn't special. I believe that there are places like Hillsborough all over the country where young people are hurting, feeling alone, and being discriminated against because of who they are. And I believe it's important, now that I've been put in this position, for me to stay strong for all those young people and for my community, end quote, Lila Perry said in a press conference.
Quote, I believe that inside Lila is a female. I believe that she wants to have the female body and wants to be like the rest of females, but I know right now that's not physically possible, the 17-year-old said. Quote, the only thing that bothers me is that Lila was in the girls' locker room. Some girls already have insecurity problems getting dressed in front of other girls as it is, much less having to get dressed in front of a boy, end quote. Her views reflect conflicting attitudes towards Perry in Hillsborough.
The opposing views of both sides are understandable. When a girl is changing in the locker room, they would probably be thinking the transgender that was previously male is looking at them inappropriately. But to a transgender individual, they do not identify themselves with their old gender, so they feel like they belong in the bathroom for the gender they identify themselves with.
Many people feel uncomfortable and threatened in situations where a transgender is trying to, quote, fit in with their new choice of identity. Most of the time, though, people who believe transgenders are a threat to a person's privacy are not properly educated on the psychological beliefs of a transgender.
Perry's case reflects the reality in some small rural communities that are addressing the issue of accommodations for transgender students before the state legislature gets around to it. Missouri is one of the 28 states with no state-level protections for LGBT people from discrimination in employment, housing, and public accommodations.
LGBT advocates caution against giving too much attention to the, quote, bathroom question, end quote. Given evidence from a growing number of school districts suggesting that transgender-friendly policies work. A number of cases at the district and state court levels have interpreted non-discrimination laws to apply to transgender students, granting them equal access to school facilities, including bathrooms.
Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick says, quote, "A line has been crossed by the federal government after the Department of Justice sent a letter on transgender bathroom use in public schools across the United States," end quote. Attorney General Loretta Lynch responded by saying, quote, "There is no room in our schools for discrimination of any kind, including discrimination against transgender students on the basis of their sex."
Quote, "Most Americans, including this governor, believe that government is searching for a solution to a problem that has yet to be defined. Now, both the federal courts and the U.S. Congress must intercede to stop this massive executive branch overreach, which clearly oversteps constitutional authority," end quote, McCrory said in a statement.
Quote, "As is consistently recognized in civil rights cases, the desire to accommodate others' discomfort cannot justify a policy that singles out and disadvantages a particular class of students to ensure that all students, including transgender students, can attend school in an environment free from discrimination based on sex," end quote, the letter says. The guidance takes the same approach to the bathroom issue. A school may provide gender-separated facilities, but it must allow transgender students to access such facilities consistent with their gender identity. If a school opts for individual stalls, it must make them available to all students.
Schools should let transgender students use bathrooms, locker rooms, and other facilities that are differentiated by sex consistent with their gender identity. People should address transgender students by their preferred names and pronouns. Schools cannot require students to have a medical diagnosis, undergo any medical treatment, or produce a birth certificate before treating them consistent with their gender identity.
Many people are unaware of the psychological beliefs of a transgender individual. For example, if someone who is originally born male wants to change their identity to that of a female, they do not identify themselves as male, even if they have not undergone a sexual reassignment surgery yet. Usually, transgender individuals feel like they are, quote, "conforming to the wrong gender," end quote, at a young age, but do not speak of it because of embarrassment and discrimination.
But to the side of someone who has to change or use the same bathroom as a transgender individual, they could feel uncomfortable and insecure. Many teenagers struggle with insecurities of their bodies as is, and changing in front of other people is difficult enough, let alone someone they view as the opposite sex.
The letter going out today to kindergarten through grade 12 schools, colleges, and universities that receive federal funding affirms that the Title IX of the Education Amendments of 1972 in banning sex discrimination also bans gender identity discrimination. Quote, "A student's sex is determined by the student's gender identity," end quote, it states. Quote, "This means that a school must not treat transgender students differently from the way it treats other students of the same sex," end quote. The draft letter continues, quote, For example, a school must treat transgender female students the same way it treats other female students.
If school districts don't comply, they will be in violation of Title IX anti-discrimination laws, could be sued in federal court, and would be at risk for losing billions in federal funds according to the directive. Besides drawing a line with social conservatives over gay rights and sexual identity, the administration is trying to create a uniform national policy to provide a safe, non-discriminatory environment.
Quote, "No student should ever have to go through the experience of feeling unwelcome at school or on a college campus," end quote, King said in a statement. Quote, "We must ensure that our young people know that whoever they are or wherever they come from, they have the opportunity to get a great education in an environment free from discrimination, harassment, and violence," end quote.
The North Carolina law enacted in March requires transgender people using public bathroom facilities to choose those corresponding to their sex at birth, even if that differs from the gender with which they identify.
Last week, Target announced on its website that it would allow transgender employees and customers to choose the restroom and fitting room that corresponded with their gender identities. About a month earlier, North Carolina passed a law restricting bathroom access to transgender people, a bill that set off a national debate that has even extended to the presidential campaign.
It has since also made Target the intense focus of conservative activists, lawmakers, and consumers who oppose the company's stance, highlighting the potential risks when a company takes a position on a hotly debated social issue. Some groups have used Target's announcements as a rallying cry, arguing that Target's policies threaten the public's safety. This has been a widely controversial topic ever since North Carolina addressed it in their bathroom bill. Overall, this prohibiting law is unneeded. There has never been any statistical evidence to state that harm has been done by letting a transgender individual using the bathroom corresponding to their identity.
If more people were educated on a transgender's psychological beliefs, there may not be as much discontent for the law, and transgenders across the United States could become more accepted over time.
Thank you, and good night.